the California State Preschool Program CSPP QRIS Block Grant RFA. We're going to give everyone one more minute to get settled and get ready, and then we'll begin. Thank you. And it's presented by myself, Serini, and Cecilia Fisher-Doms for the California Department of Education. So the purpose of this webinar is to review the 15-16 CSPP QRIS Block Grant application posted as the RFA. It was posted this morning. Topics will include the RFA as well as all attachments, and on the bottom is the link for you to find that RFA. Our outline today, we have a couple things we'll be going over. We're going to begin with a table of contents review, the RFA review, eligibility and priorities, the critical dates, funding, application and attachments, and our scoring. So RFA overview, the purpose really is to award the $50 million in CSPP QRIS block grants to local consortia. The utilization of existing quality continuum framework, hybrid rating matrix, and implementation guide, that's part of the background and part of the pieces for the QRIS. And C, the funding, the Prop 98 funding that will go through and be expended through September 30th of 2016 because it is a 15-month grant. And we're going to begin with general eligibility. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that if you have questions, please type them into the question box. We will try to answer them as we go along online on the question box. That's to your right-hand side on your screen. If we don't get to your questions, we can get to them at the end, and if we don't get to any of those, they will be added to our frequently asked questions later, but we'll remind you throughout that. So back to general eligibility. First, you need to be a local consortium, and there are 4 things that you need to have. You need to be using the quality continuum framework. You need to be utilizing a tiered rating matrix that includes the 3 common tiers as in the implementation guide. You need to be operating a QRIS on or before June 1st, 2015, rating early care and educational programs. And so if you intend to apply for this RFA, you need to be able to show that you have rated programs. And it needs to be inclusive of stakeholders.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here with, we have actually some priorities for the CSPP, I'm going to use the acronym, QRIS block grant. So the first time, we had priority 1 and priority 2. In this case, we have priority 1A and priority 1B. And so I'm going to clarify who they are. Priority 1A are those applicants who had an existing approved action plan that was already on file with the Early Education and Support Division back in June of 2014. And of course, they were a local consortium. They had set ambitious yet achievable targets for state preschool programs. In those action plans, they also described how they were going to use, in their applications, they described how they were going to use the QRIS block grant funds to increase the number of CSPP programs that were in higher quality tiers and also help those others to get there. And they could describe how no more than 20% was being used for assessment and access projects, and they completed a budget narrative. So they completed all of those things. Those are priority 1A. Okay, now priority 1B looks very much the same, but the difference here is highlighted in the green. So they had a QRIS plan with the division as of March 10th of this past year. So they were what we would have called priority 2 the last time. And so now they have an action plan on file, and then they're doing all of those other same things. They've already committed to that. And so that's the difference between priority 1A and priority 1B. So they now are in a larger category of priority 1 that has these two subsets, okay? And once again, we will have priority 2, and these are new entrants to accessing the QRIS block grants. So they're going to have to do all of those things that we talked about with setting ambitious yet achievable targets, describing how they're going to reward state preschools in tiers 4 or higher, and how they're going to bring other CSPPs, how they're going to improve their quality so that they can be high-quality state preschool programs, and how they're going to use some of those monies for assessment and access. So they do all of those same things. But in addition to what we just said for priority 1A and B, they're also going to describe their local QRIS plan. So it implies then that we don't know what they're doing locally. They're going to describe everything related to their QRIS plan. So this is just their QRIS. What they're doing is in addition to those things that are specific to the state preschool block grant. Okay, and that larger bullet, they're going to have to demonstrate that they did have an operational QRIS on or before the release of the RFA. And they're going to demonstrate, submit to us with their letter of intent, documentation that supports that at least one, not a high bar, but at least one program was fully rated according to the guidelines in the implementation guide. Okay. So that sets us up. We're going to pause as we will through this to answer questions, but I also wanted to use this opportunity to say that we have recently released our frequently asked questions regarding the QRS block grant, and the URL for that is on that page. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to go to that. I don't even know how many questions there are, but there are a lot of questions, and they're organized in various topics, general questions, eligibility questions, rating questions, funding, quality improvement activities, assessment and access activities, and then other questions that didn't seem to fall into those others. So let's take a moment here. Oh, and I have, just as if you have gone on to the page about the State Preschool Block Grant, just as those previous webinars were posted, we will also be posting this webinar. So if you have colleagues who weren't able to get on, because we do recognize this was short notice, and we do apologize for that. It was a number of technical difficulties that, so you will be able to access and the PowerPoint, and then at some point we will also have the audio as well as the transcription. Okay, so we're going to take a moment. Okay, so the question that came in, I had just remarked on it, so I will repeat it. For our priority 2 applicants, so I'm just going to go back to the priority 2, that lower one about demonstrating that they had an operational one. That's going to require that priority 2 applicants submit the documentation, which would be what would be the report from the independent assessors on the class and ERS, whatever is appropriate to the setting, as well as whatever other report addresses the other elements like lead teacher, program director, and so on. The other report that fully addresses how you've gotten to the rating, the formal rating of that program. So it would be a series of documents that are actually going to be submitted electronically when the letter of intent is submitted. Okay, so now I'm going to move forward. Okay, so this chart demonstrates the similarities or differences in what is being submitted. Everyone is submitting, well, I guess what is not is in not any particular color, the sections 1 and then 3 to 8. What's highlighted is what is different about our three submitting types. For Priority 1A, they have an action plan that's on file. For Priority 1B, they have a QRIS plan from this previous block grant that's on file. And Priority 2 are submitting a QRIS plan as part of their application. And you'll see as we go through this that Section 2 is actually the largest section of the application, which Priorities 1A and 1B only have to refresh should they, well, it's actually Priority 1B would refresh should they need to, and Priority 1A has a process for refreshing their action plans. Okay, so now we're going to look at critical dates. And yes, we said the RFA was released yesterday, and that really didn't happen. It was released this morning, but other than that, we're having the webinar now. The big date to remember is every applicant, 1A, 1B, 2, has to submit the letter of intent by June 11th. That's the date to get your signatures of your lead agencies that you want to be submitting. And because this is an electronic submission, so there's a plus to that, you have clear until midnight to meet that June 11th date. Okay, and then Priority 1A and B, which is the one we're looking at, they have their application, which are 1, 3 to 8 sections, to be submitted by July 6th, right? It's the Monday after a holiday. We recognize that. Okay, and then we will be reviewing those applications. There will be an intent to fund by that Friday. Then there will be the 10-day appeal process, and pending the review of those appeals, we'll be posting the final awards near the end of July, and then there'll be and then we'll be moving on to process the funding. For Priority 2s, again, everything is the same through the letter of intent of June 11th. But for Priority 2, they are having the opportunity for their own individual technical assistance webinar. We're also offering that should you want to come to the department when we're having the webinar, you can be with us in person and we can field your questions in person or via the webinar, but that's a specific session that is just dedicated to Priority 2 applicants. So then they have a later period, they have later in July to submit their full application, and then we do have a longer period of review because they actually have a larger body of information to review. We'll be posting that letter of intent August 6th. Then there'll be again the 10-day appeal period. Should they come in, then we'll be reviewing those and then posting the final award notices the end of August, and then we'll be proceeding with processing those funding following that, so that'll be like in September. Okay, so now let's go through those forms and what you have to do. First and foremost, remember everybody, June 11th, there you have your letter of intent. It's a form that's in the application. You're filling out the information through, I think it's the top 2/3 of it, but then there is going to be a signature and a date for the LEA is the local educational agency, and should the consortia lead be different, then there is a place for that consortia lead. And then notice the attention priority 2. You not only do that, but then you're going to be sending in that, with that submission, all of your documentation to support that you've at least rated 1. You don't have to submit it for a bunch of them, just a documentation that 1 has been fully rated before June 1st. And everything goes into that email, psqrsbg@cde.ca.gov. So obviously, electronic signatures apply because these will all be electronic documents. Okay. Now we're going to look at funding. The marvelous thing is that we have legislative commitment for an ongoing $50 million. This is a tremendous asset for supporting QRIS and supporting state preschool programs. So that's terrific. We will be basing the funding allocations off of the 2013-14 state preschool enrollment. Now, you will all know that we did have expansion funding for in 14-15, but there's not real data on, we don't actually have attendance data for that, so it'll be off of the confirmed attendance from 13-14. So in some cases, some counties' numbers might not have gone up from what we had in this most recent, the first RFA. And then the process is, based on those letters of intent, so this past, the first one for 14-15, we had 23 applicants representing 28 counties. So the corresponding state preschool enrollment for those counties was used, and then the $50 million was prorated across those, for those 28 counties, and then given to 23 applicants. The same thing will happen for this if we have now, if the coverage is for 35 counties, then we'll be prorating it to whatever many applicants. Now, I want to clarify, because we have county applicants and we also have regional applicants. We had Placer, who applied for Placer and Nevada. We had Merced, who applied for Merced, Mariposa, and Madera, and we had Eno, who applied for Eno, Alpine, and Mono. So that's why we can have a smaller number of applicants, but it will cover a broader number of our counties. And then, as we've mentioned before, this will be a 15-month application grant, so that there is coverage from year to year. Okay. So now we're going to look at so we've done the letter of intent, that's Form A, but the application has a signature page, Form B, and the QRS Block Grant Action Plan, large document, Form C, and then the QRS Block Grant Budget Narrative and Spreadsheet, which are in Form D, which is not part of the RFA, and we'll explain that, okay? So Form B, it has who is the consortia lead, signatures, contact information. And if that consortia lead is not an LEA, then we need the LEA. Kind of interesting, we did this just to change it up a bit. It's sort of the inverse of Form A. Form A has the LEA first, and then if it's not the LEA, then we have the consortia lead. But that's, and then there are two other pieces in Form B. Who is the program lead, so who manages the day-to-day, because that might not be, say, the county superintendent. And then who is the fiscal lead. These are really important because when we have follow-up questions, it's likely that we're going to be talking to these two individuals. Okay, that's simply Form B. Now we get into Form C, large piece. Okay, Form C has the consortia participants. It has that QRS plan, what description of your QRIS. It has CSPP participation data tables, what are you doing to bring them for your local block grants, what is your quality improvement, and what is your access and assessment and access projects. And actually the budget narrative has moved off and is now in Form D, so we didn't catch that. Okay, so here we go. All of the things include, which we just pointed out, participants, what's your local QRIS, data tables, block grants, quality improvement for CSPPs, access and assessment and access, budget narrative, and budget spreadsheet, which are really part of the whole thing, but they're on a separate form. Okay. So who, for element 1, is consortia participants. So we're not predisposing that we understand who is the consortia lead. That was on Form B. These are the required participants for your local QRIS. It has to have a local educational agency and could have multiples. It has to have the County First 5 Commission, has to have a post-secondary institution. It doesn't distinguish whether it's public or private. The local planning council, the local resource and referral agency, and it can have any other agencies that are providing services to children birth to 5. That could be the county welfare agency, it could be the home visiting. And remember that if you're applying regionally, you have one for each county. So if there are 5 in that region, then you're going to have 5 sets of these things. If a state preschool qualifies and serves infants and toddlers, does that the state preschool block grant cover services to those infant and toddler classrooms? We haven't gotten into the local block grants, so I'll just say sort of preemptively, once the state preschool contractor gets a local block grant, it's up to them to decide how they're going to distribute it. It's a local block grant. That's at their discretion. So, but we will be getting to that point. Okay. Now, this element is for priority 2 applicants and can be refreshed for priority 1B. Priority 1A has a process already with the department, so this is for them. And they have these 7 elements, and so we're going to look at each of them. The first one is to describe an overview of your QRIS. Now, last time we just asked this question, just describe your QRIS. We actually got a few random, so we've provided a little bit more focus, and so we've divided this one into 4 questions. So you're going to describe the local early learning community, a little bit of background on how it was developed, that you've been thinking about it for years and finally, started to do it, or what was the trigger for that? What are the challenges and barriers, like it's really been difficult without having dedicated funds, or we've been able to leverage on, say, the child signature program, whatever that is, and then successes or lessons learned in operating it. Now, because we expect this to be primarily the new entries into the QRIS world, we would imagine that these might be just what your current challenges or struggles are or lessons learned just in bringing that together. But it provides you a little bit of a shape to describing your local QRIS. It might have been challenges with bringing the necessary stakeholders together. So whatever it happens to be, this provides you a little bit of a framework. So that's new. Okay. One of the things that are a requirement by the law is that the QRIS, whichever you have operating, has to comply with and use the quality continuum framework. So we're going to ask you to look at the quality continuum framework and to describe what you're doing to incorporate that specifically into your QRIS. And then the B2 question will ask you about the tiered rating matrix. So the quality continuum framework, we'll look at that, and it actually has two pieces, the rating matrix and the continuous quality improvement pathways. And so this is asking then about the rating matrix. Are you using the just the point system all the way through? Is your local Tier 2 a block system? Have you done something? So that'll ask you, what are you doing in your local Tier 2, because that's yours, and then what are you doing in your local Tier 5? Are you just using the point system? Are you adding additional requirements, or are you doing a block system? Everybody has to do something at Tier 5. So that form is going to look like the following page. I guess it doesn't. So we provide you information with where to find the quality continuum framework. So that's there will be information about where to get to that. Then the quality continuum framework describes what are the QRS elements and the common tools and resources that we have available to you, and then there's another page of that. And you'll notice that the quality continuum framework has 3 core elements. If I just go back a moment, it has child development and school readiness. Then it has teaching, teachers and teaching, and program and environment. These 3 core areas are through the entire system. And so you'll see that reflected in the quality continuum framework, the rating matrix, and the continuous quality improvement pathways. Okay, so, and then the hybrid rating matrix, and so then the next slides will show you the refreshed one. Now notice, if you've seen these before, you might not have seen it in purple. That's because there have been some changes. The consortia has recently met in this past month, May, and made some slight modifications. So you're going to have to be attentive that you have to use the most current one, and it points out that there are some additional elements that are approved for assessments. You'll also see those in the implementation guide. And then if you go to element 6, sort of the middle of that slide, program environment rating scales, the consortium made a change to the 3-point value. So we're a little to the right of middle, and you'll see there it says assessment on the whole tool, whichever is appropriate, ITERs, ECHRs, or FICRs, and these are all the revised instruments, and the results are used to inform the quality improvement plan. So that's a change. What it used to have was an external independent ERS assessment at an average score of 4.0. So a significant change there. And then for the 5-point value, there's also the opportunity to use a current national accreditation that has been approved by the Department of Education. And these changes go into effect July 1st and have to be implemented no later than September 30th. So that is new, and so now you know that. Okay. Then it will ask you to fill in the blanks on your local Tier 2 and your local Tier 5. If you said we're just going to use the point system, that's going to end up being blank, but it's not a problem. But if you've made any block system or point additions, then this is your place to demonstrate that. Okay, and now we're moving to the to C, which is talking about what is your, remember we're in just your local QRIS. So we've got 4 questions that ask about your local QRIS. You answer those, and remember it's going to say, are you, you have to be using the implementation guide, and there are sections in the implementation guide that says, and this, however you do this, is a local decision. This is your place in C2 to say, what is your local decision? And then the C3 asks also, what are your local ways of monitoring what you're happening with data collection about the rating and assessing. Okay, and then The D section, oh, okay, I keep forgetting this. We also point out where you find that implementation guide. So when you go to the page, it will talk about, make sure that you understand where that is. We've got that also on the CSPP block grant. And so then that's just, it's pretty uneventful, but that's the cover of the implementation guide. But there will be that refreshed one, as I just mentioned. Now to the D section. The D section refers to, remember, your QRIS quality improvement process. So we've got a series of 5 questions that ask, what are you doing? In terms of that, are you using, well, we would expect you to use the continuous quality improvement pathways, common tools, and resources. And so you're going to talk about how you do that and fill in those blanks. And each of those questions, are you using incentives? What are you doing to support quality improvement? And this is generally where we'll see people talking. Remember, you have to talk about using the screening tool, how you're maybe using local coaches, that kind of thing. Okay. And there again is the link to the continuous quality improvement pathways document so that you know what we're talking about. And then we look at what that document looks like. Again, we've got those 3 core areas: child development and school readiness, teachers and teaching, and then that document actually has the URLs that link you to what we're actually talking about, and then program and environment, and again, those supported ones. And I'm just going to go back a moment. You'll see that we have resources for family engagement. I do want to point out that we recognize we don't have a reliable tool for assessing family engagement, but it is a very strong element, and we really want to see that recognized in your quality improvement activities. And we've adopted the Strengthening Families 5 protective factors, so just want to make sure that you understand just because it's not a rated element doesn't mean it's an insignificant item in terms of continuous quality improvement. Okay. Section E is talking about convening and strengthening partnerships. We certainly expect that the consortium is not, that it really is engaging your early childhood partners in the process. So it will not only talk about those who have signed on, but the E2 question will also talk about those others. Now, some of them might be members of your consortium, but these are not the required members of your consortium. So it asks about engaging those members of the ECE community. And it also, in the E4, will also talk about, and also how are we helping to promote positive practices to ensure success of children as they progress through their learning career and on into kindergarten. And Section F will say, okay, you've got a QRS. We know that some of you who are filling this out will be our priority 2s, and it will be new. But there is an expectation that at some point, so you might be answering this prospectively, that you're looking at how are you ensuring that your QRIS is in fact having positive impacts on child outcome. And so how are you going to use that data for self-reflection, for monitoring, for evaluating? A little opportunity to do that. Okay. And the last one in this section is G, is that this isn't a private affair. We want to make sure that you are disseminating the information to parents and the public. Again, as priority 2 applicants, you might be answering this as prospectively what your plans are for doing this and for engaging like your local resource and referral into the process and so on, so that you recognize that it is an expectation over time. And as we do these over the next 5 to 20-some years, hopefully these will be far more robust than they are initially, and we recognize that. So that was the QRS plan. Now we move into the ones that are true for everybody, priorities 1A, 1B, and 2. We're talking specifically about state preschool programs. So when we say state preschool programs, what in fact do we mean? Okay, we mean state preschool programs that have a state preschool contract, and those could be center-based programs, or they could be homes in family child care home networks that have state preschool contracts. The last budget cycle opened up state preschool contracts to family child care home networks, and so there will now likely be homes that in fact are delivering state preschool services. And then it could be any number of braided programs, CSPP with Head Start, with state or local First Five funding, with Part B IDEA, that would have been with special education preschools. It could be Title I preschools. It could be in combination with our general child care sites, with our, but they're in combination with state migrant centers. They could be state preschools with that also have tribal sites, or any other local that we're not aware of. But in any case, you've got a state preschool by itself or in combination. Okay, so we're going to have this notion of ambitious yet achievable data targets. So one of the ambitious yet achievable one is to recognize the number and percentage of state preschool programs that are in your QRIS. Some consortia have been doing this for a long time, and they've actually engaged all of them. Some are new, and we were looking at ambitious yet achievable attempts to bring them into the local QRIS. So, and then, so the sites, we want to also, not that they're in and participating, you know, they're a licensed program and in good standing, but that they actually get up to the top tiers, to tiers 4 and 5, and then we also want to see what that means in terms of the number of children. So let's look at what those look like. So you're going to be increasing those numbers, and the baseline is today, how many state preschool sites are in your QRIS? And then that's out of the total that's in the county, and we do have a way to know that, so we can do that. But that's, so the first column after the site, you see where it says total, and it's a longer bar there, total number of sites in the county or the region. You're going to put in that number. We're also going to be able to check that against our database. Remember I said we're going off of the 13-14 data, so we'll be checking that, and then when you do, the percent is the baseline against the total. So your numerator, denominator. And then you're going to say the target for 15-16 is where do you think you'll be by the end of June of 2016, the same thing for 16-17, 17-18, and 18-19. And every year, these numbers will just keep moving until you reach your total, and at some point you're at 100%. The 3B table is taking out of the numbers in, if you looked at table B and there was a total at the bottom of the page, that's going to be the baseline, is that new baseline on table Roman 3B. So the total number of programs, CSPPs, in your QRIS today is the baseline. How many do you think there will be at the end of fiscal year 15-16 and so on? And then on that table, you're going to aim at how many are in Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, Tier 5. Okay, and if there are 20 in your baseline, then the numbers from in Tiers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 cannot exceed the number 20 and also should not be less than the number 20. Okay, does that follow? Okay, but we'll go through that. And then the Roman 3C is the same kind of thing, only now we're talking about children. And we're not going to do the how many are in Tiers 3, 4, and 5. It's just back to to Table A of all of those programs and how you mapped them out. Now you're just mapping the children that correspond to those sites. Okay, so, and we'll spend more time with our Tier 2 or to our Priority 2 applicants on that. Okay. Now, again, we're looking at state preschool block grant. The local consortia gets to decide of that portion of money that come to your consortia, how much of that money are you going to award to the state preschools that are at tiers 4 and 5? And there are actually 4 decisions. What's going to tier 4? And is there a difference between state preschools that are in center locations compared to those that are in individual homes? And there might be different factors that are based on classroom enrollment or based on child enrollment. So you have to identify what those are and what's that amount going to be. And then you have those same kinds of questions for tier 5. Is your awards for tier 5 different from tier 4? And if they are, then what are they and what are the factors? It's that straightforward. Okay, there are 3 uses of the funds. The first one was those block grant awards. The second use is for quality improvements for those state preschools not yet at tier 4. So there are 2 purposes. One is to bring them into the fold, engagement. If you have to do outreach, if you have to send people to them and to convince them and that kind of thing, outreach. And then we imagine more would be to the B part of that. What are you doing to help bring them up? Is it the same kinds of efforts that you've already identified in your QRIS block grant, in your QRIS plan for quality improvement, or is it the same, and you can say that it's the same, or are there additional kinds of things that you're going to do to also support the state preschool programs? And then the third use is for assessment and access projects. Many people will be using the up to 20% for the assessment because you can use these funds to assess state preschool programs to do that costly independent ERS assessor or class assessor to pay for those assessments. Depending on how many funds you have, it can go broader than just state preschool. It'll be at your disposal. And then you can also use it for assessment, for access projects, for informing people or the community about high quality early learning. And so we'll look at some of those things. So the block grants, and now we're getting into Form D. Let me go back on the access. Oftentimes those relate to building a QRS website or helping the R&Rs have access to the ratings so that when parents call, they can provide that kind of information. It might mean publicity or campaigns about what high quality is. So we provide some guidance about what those access are in the frequently asked questions. Okay, so now we're moving to Form D, which is the budget narrative. This time we've created an Excel spreadsheet that when you fill out sections 7A, B, and C, they will auto-populate to Roman 8, which is the budget spreadsheet. So remember when back you were deciding what you're going to do for your local QRS block grants and what the factors are, now you're going to fill in what the factors are by site and so on. How many sites do you have at this? What is that award amount? And then you put in those, the number and the grant amount, and it'll tell you what the total is, and it'll self-populate. So that's one of the Excel forms. The second one, I know this, remember you'll get a chance to look at this when it's in front of you. It'll be a lot easier to see than I'm sure on your screen. But this is, what are you doing for quality improvement, continuous quality improvement? So this allows you to do staffing for quality improvement, travel to go out there, maybe a contract for coaches or a contract for bringing in, say, CPIN to come in and do particular training or whatever that is. So that one works out. It also has training stipends for people to get training, or you might have incentives to, you might create incentive grants for, say, improving early learning areas or the playground or whatever that their ERS that their coaches says needs some improvement. So it's very open. You get to decide what that is. And then the third form is assessment and access, And again, you've got the people that you might be hiring to do assessments or to manage that process, and then their contractual, all of those kinds of things. Here is the reminder again that whatever this number is, the system, because now this is an Excel one, will auto-correct. The number can't be more than 20% of the entire grant, and it'll warn you that, no, that you're going to have to redo your numbers if that was more than 20%. And then the nice thing is, then the fourth tab in this Excel spreadsheet will go to the spreadsheet, which will auto-populate. What you're going to have to fill in is what is your indirect rate, and then that will help to complete that one. But hopefully this will be a big benefit for every priority to complete that section. Okay, so now I'm moving to the next part. So we've just gone through the letter of intent, the signature page, the formal signature page of the leads, then the section C, which is the action plan, and Form D, which is the budget information. So A, B, C, D. Now, when the application, which is Forms B, C, and D, are submitted, we will have sets of reviewers who will be reviewing, and we're using a scale that follows for most of the narrative in this fashion at a rating of 2. Insufficient, lacks specificity. We're really not sure that we've got a complete answer here. 4 is sufficient. We've got some information, but we don't have maybe all of the detail that would really fully and robustly explain exactly how you're doing it. And 6, which says we really get a nice clear picture. We know this is a comprehensive answer. They fully described how they're going to accomplish whatever the question is asking about. Okay, and now this is the scoring rubric with what the points that you could earn. I want you to notice that section 2, it has no points. It is because priority 1A and 1B. That's okay. Priority 1B can resubmit it, highlight what they've changed. Remember, 2A has new questions, so you can submit that, revise, because sometimes when you're working on these things, you've made changes. You can submit those to us every year. You're going to be able to, you'll be able to, the ones will be able to refresh that, but you're not scored on it. So that's why that's NA. And so when you get down to the bottom, you'll see that priority 1A and 1B have lower numbers, 60 or 72. 72 if they have any CSPP family childcare homes that they have in their county or region, or the lower number of the 60. Right now, we think most are going to fall on the 60 side. And then priority 2s have, again, the 2 higher numbers. Most of you are going to fall on that 201 number. I know, but we have these odd numbers. Or if you had a family childcare home networks providing with CSPP contracts, then it goes up to the 213. So big difference. Okay, other things you want to pay attention to. In the RFA, actually it's at the very back of there are key terms so that we're all understanding things the same way. There are what would disqualify you not having us with all of the information at the time, various things, and that's on page 38 of the application. What the appeals process is described also on that page. I'm not sure 38 final, but
39.
Or 39. Yeah, 39. And what the assurances are. I think when we did our final, we might have a few little. It might have moved back one page number from when we had prepared this earlier. But you know, if we're off, the numbers are off only by a page one way or the other. Okay. And now, and remember, this is the point of contact is the PSQRS block grant, and we've left ourselves time for questions. So we'll begin to field those. Remember, you can continue to send them in, and I'm going to go through what we've looked at so far, what have been submitted so far. Okay, the first question I have is, if we rated a program with the old matrix, is that okay for submitting the plan now? Yes, it is okay, and that would be what is expected, because the change in the rating matrix is effective July 1st and no later than September 30th of 15. So we would expect everything with your baseline to be off of the current rating matrix. Well, I shouldn't say the current, because now the new one is posted, but is with a 4.0 average for element 6 in the rating matrix. So that's acceptable. And then do we go back and rate? No, nobody goes back and rate. Everything is, whatever the rating is current and stays current until that program cycle comes up, or should they choose to want to use their block grant funds or use their local money to pay your assessor to come out. If they want to jump the cycle, they can pay for that, but you're not obligated to come out and do another rating before the next cycle just because the ratings, we've made some accommodations to the rating matrix. So that was a very good question. No, you don't go back and change. And this is the benefit of having the consortium that's currently operating, because they're asking those same questions. And no, we don't have to make those changes. We move forward from when there is a change, there is a period of change that allows that to happen and for it to be eased into, so that there's not a massive change as we make changes, which are inevitable as we progress through the life of what QRIS in California is going to be. Okay, my next question. The state preschool site description for sites with IDEA Part B preschool classrooms, would these classrooms need to be included in the rating to count as part of the site or to benefit from the block grant? Okay, a point of clarification. When we say anything early, Head Start, Title I, it's not that they're on the same premises. It means that that classroom is a braided classroom and has funding from multiple funding sources, not just that door number 1 is state preschool and door number 2 is special ed preschool and door number 3 is Head Start. Those are coexisting programs. They're not blended. The only way they count as state preschool, this and something, is if it is state preschool and something else. So that means that that local agency is blending the funding from state preschool and the IDEA Part B or Title I funding, or even the local control funding formula. Yippee, in the best of all possible worlds, we'd love to be able to see that they're using their local control funding formula to do that. So it's state preschool plus something in that door, that classroom with those children. The fact that, let's say, that this school district or this program, the world's best preschool, has state preschool on the premises and any number of other things, those are all very lovely. In this block grant, it's relative to the state preschool. Once that the world's best preschool ever gets their local block grant for their state preschool contract, they get to decide whether they want to spread the money through the rest of those marvelous classrooms or not. But allocation will only be based off of classrooms that we have information about here in the department. And for those of you who have state preschool contracts, you'll know that that means that they submit their children on the 801 reporting form every month. So if those children in classrooms are not part of what you're ever reporting to the department, they're not part of what the local consortia is getting their proration of the $50 million of, and it wouldn't be part of how they're going to determine well, I can't say what their local funding factors are, but they're going to be getting money that's relative to what the department knows as state preschool children. So those are all really good questions. Okay, if the site includes a state preschool part day site as well as a C-Center class, then the C-Center classes can be included in the site funding as well, okay? So once again, I'm the state preschool contractor. I'm ABCD school district, or I'm ABCD or early education program. I get it because of my part-day state preschool program. When the block grant is received, that ABC program can decide how it's going to use that money. I'm going to remind you, though, that if they're using that money for their infant toddler program, that program might lose its funding when its next cycle comes up if they haven't maintained its status as a tier 4 or 5, because you're only going to get that state preschool program contractor is only going to get a local block grant if it's maintained high quality of a tier 4 or 5. But once they get it, it's at their disposal how they're going to use that to maintain high quality. It could be distributed through their whole program. They could give everybody a $5 an hour raise, woohoo, or whatever. I mean, those are their local decisions, depend on how much money they get and what they want to decide. Those are local decisions from the state preschool contractor. Okay, not the QRIS, not your local consortium decision. Okay, what if you have a Head Start program, participate, that at the time was not a state preschool program, but recently received funding? Okay, remember, you're counting your baseline with who was there as of June 1st. So if that Head Start had a state preschool contract as of June 1st, you can count them in your consortia's numbers. That's perfectly fine. Remember, your baseline is your baseline, I would say as of today, but the easiest thing is to think of as of June 1st. And if that Head Start had a state preschool contract as of June 1st, and that's very possible because we had preschool expansion applications this year, and they know those answers now, that's very possible. I'm just reminding you that, remember, when we did our allocation, we're basing our allocation off of 13, 14 state preschool numbers, but that's on our part. But locally, yes, you want to include any state preschool program in your county or region. Definitely count those new state preschool contractors into your baseline. Okay, is it correct that 25% of the block grant assessment funds can be used for assessment of non-state preschool classrooms if it is adequate to go beyond them? Yes, that is true. The 20% can be used to doing rating and assessment as well as access projects. That's at the disposal of the local QRIS consortium. It's just that we can't have state preschool contractors crying to the department that they weren't able to be assessed because you didn't have the money to do them. Now, you have to, and so this is a big thing for local consortia. You have to look at what is your cycle of assessments and so on. If those state preschool contractors already fell into the cycle of assessment and they're not due to be assessed until, say, next year, they might use their block grant or they might use their own program funds to get a higher rating, to get a higher block grant. But they can't ask to jump ahead of the line. So it is sort of a balancing act. The money is for them first and foremost, but it has to fall within the implementation program guidelines and your local QRIS decisions about your rating cycles. So it is for them first, but within the parameters of the implementation guide and your local decisions about your rating processes. So good question. This question is regard to the letter of intent. The letter of intent with the electronic signatures is one email to the one that's on the screen now, the psqrsbg@cde.ca.gov. Yes, do we have to submit an electronic form on your website? No, we mean to this email address. And so you can have scanned it and then just submit it as a scanned document to that email address. That's what we mean about submitting it electronically. We're not going to have the doors to the department open till midnight to have a paper copy. As a matter of fact, we're only going to be accepting an electronic letter of intent. So you have to look at scanning, doing what you need to do, or having them as attachments, fill it out as it is a Word document. You could fill it out as a Word document, attach it as a Word document, and submit it, and then you're going to have to look at those signatures. That's why we think you're going to have to scan it and then submit it. And remember, for the priority 2s, you're going to have scanned or have documents that you can submit electronically with the documentation that you have fully rated one early education program. It doesn't have to be a state preschool program. Whatever was the one that you started with first, or was your most recent one, or we don't care which one. We just want to have one fully rated program that demonstrates that you are a fully operational, not just dreaming and thinking or planning, that you've actually done that, you've hired somebody, or you've secured an assessor from a neighboring consortia, but who has actually done that. So all of those things are lined up. Okay. 801A. Thank you. And this question is regarding to the 801A. The 801A forms are used. If those forms are used, well, every state preschool contractor, everyone who has a direct service contract or track submits information about the children that are being served. It's required. If those forms are used, are you counting the number of children on the 801A form cumulatively across the year or a specific point in time? Beautiful question, because we found with the first application, the 14-15 one, we did have some problem with that. So we have made, so whoever was that writer, that's a great question. We're now using the October 801A enrollment numbers from 13-14. So it is a point in time so that we don't have, what we know is obviously over time there are more children. When we were reviewing our first round of applications, we had discrepancies with those data tables, and now we hope that we will not have that problem. We're using the point in time for the sites and the children, and so we think that that will work and be more effective for you. So thank you for that clarifying question. Back to the Family Chapter Home Networks. In the most recently posted frequently asked questions, which for the department goes through a full legal review before posting, we did get a clarification, which I will publicly acknowledge is different from what we had stated in our last webinar about Family Child Care Home Networks providing CSPP services. In the frequently asked questions, as now our understanding is that they must have a state preschool contract to participate. And that's how they're acknowledged that they're providing state preschool services, because the clarification is that these are Prop 98 education funds, and they're going to our contractors who have Prop 98 education funds, which is currently only the case for state preschool contractors. And we do acknowledge that the frequently asked questions did provide that clarification and is different than the answer that we provided previously. So I'm looking to see if we have, so I'm going to pause so we can review what's come in and see if they need to write some more for me. Okay, a little pause. Okay, it looks like now, it looks like the only question that we have is regarding that enrollment base number that we'll be using prospectively. And what we had done previously is post the per county 801A numbers, so that even though you don't know what your allocation is, that you could make some rough estimates as to what that number is. And we will look to make that information available, and I don't have it in a posted form, but I recognize that we did provide the state preschool enrollment numbers per county previously, and so we will make that available. But at this point, I can't give you an exact time that I can get that to you, but we will make that available. Okay. I've got another question. What if you have a contractor who passes their money through to a site who gets the block grant? Okay, maybe I should ask, what if you have a contractor who passes their money through? What if you have, so I'm going to have, so if you, so I'm thinking if that's the consortium, what if the consortia has a contractor who passes their money through to a site who gets a block grant? This is still a curious question to me as the author has written it. So let's see.
It's a community college.
Okay, so it's
who lost their lab school.
Okay, so the community college, okay. So we're saying that if you are ABC State Preschool Program and you've gotten your block grant, you are going to need to be submitting to the department what you've done with your supplemental funds. But what this ABC Preschool, State Preschool Program is saying, they're not only using it for themselves, but they would be giving away some of their block grant to another agency, and that would be a little hard for me to understand how they're going to be able to substantiate that as, because you have supplemental revenue and supplemental expenses. It's going to be hard to demonstrate that that was a supplemental expense that you gave away your money to someone else. But if they use a local site for their children, okay, well, this sounds as if it is a specific individual one, And in that case, then I would say the details of which you should probably send to the PSQRSBG at cde.ca.gov, so that we can, because as I'm interpreting it, it seems unusual if you have a contract and you're contracting those children out to another site, then those children might still be state preschool children, just that they're being served through a subcontractor, and you're still reporting those children to 801. So we've got to get it clarified that if it's out through, if the state preschool program, as some of them do, have subcontracts for state preschool services, then certainly the block grant can go to that state preschool site that is serving the state preschool children in that site, just because it could be a school district who gets the money and then subcontracts out to other local agencies. So that's really part of their program. It just might not be part of, say, that LEA or whatever. But if you've got a contractual relationship, then they're in subcontract to deliver state preschool services. So, of course, that would be the case. And as a matter of fact, we'd be looking to the extent to which that site, because that would have been your state preschool site, was at a Tier 4 or 5. So ABC Preschool or ABC LEA would have been getting that preschool grant relative to that subcontracted site who was rated at a 4 and 5. You know, it's not anonymously. Those are the kids we're actually counting, and those are the sites that consortia would have been counting. We're not going to be counting a school district's headquarters. It's actually relative to every state preschool classroom. Or in the Family Child Care Home Network, it's relative to that home, not to the network headquarters, but to that rated site or that rated home. So, and if there's confusion about it, the money does go to whoever is the contractor, but it's relative to rated sites. But okay, that part is a broad general question and certainly is a good clarifying question. Okay, I'm really happy. It looks like we've addressed all of your questions, and we've even come in under our scheduled time. I can't promise when but we will be posting the PowerPoints and the audio and the transcribed webinar, but that does take us some time to do the transcription and so on. But those will be posted at a later date. And I do recall the question that asks about what are the state preschool children's enrollment numbers, and that's also on our to-do list, and we will look at getting that information out also. Thank you for your attention, and please share the information to other interested consortia, other communities. The legislative intent, as well as the department's intent, is that over time, all state preschools throughout the state are engaged in a QRIS, and that either per county or by region, communities are engaged in a QRIS process. So best of luck to all of you.